Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar on methodological challenges in research for early career professionals, which was organized by the Early Career Network within the IPA. My name is Sasha Bolt and I will be your moderator for today's session. I am a senior researcher and research broker for the Tilburg University based in the Netherlands. And I am one of the 3 chairs for the Early Career Network. And even though the other 2 chairs are not here with us today, I also would like to briefly introduce the other 2 chairs, which is Dr. Thomas Leon. He is an old age psychiatrist from Chile, and Dr. Kelvin Swartz, who is a lecturer in social work in Ireland. So the 3 of us chair the Early Career Network, which is an initiative created by the IPA. And the main goal of the ECN is to create a network of international collaboration between early career researchers and also clinicians who are interested in scientific research and collaboration. So it's mainly aimed at students, PhD students or postdocs with less than 5 years of experience, and also early career clinicians who work in old age mental health. It's a very multidisciplinary initiative, and we welcome all of those working in all aspects of old age mental health. So if you fit these criteria, and if you are not yet a member of the ECN, please do visit the IPA website, and there you will be able to find more information on the Early Career Network, and you'll be able to register. Or if you have any colleagues that might be interested, please refer them to the website. I think it's also posted on the next slide. And you can register for the network. We also have a LinkedIn page to stimulate exchange and collaboration between all the members of the network. Just continuing on to some quick housekeeping tips. Denise, could you please move the slides a bit further? We will have 3 presentations and we'll play them back to back. Yeah, so please feel free to use the chat function, that is, so not the question and answer button, but we are in Zoom, so please do use the chat function to post your questions at any time during the presentation, because we'll play them back to back, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A session. So when you have any questions and you put them there, they'll be, well, we'll ask them during the Q&A session and we'll have a discussion about them. During the presentations, all other attendees are muted, and we encourage you to turn on your camera or your audio or both during the Q&A session after the presentations to have a real discussion and to have you all on screen, which would be much more nice, of course, to have you all on screen. If you experience any technical difficulties, please try to log off and log back in again. And lastly, the program is being recorded and it will be posted on our web page. So if you have any colleagues that couldn't make it today but that are interested in watching the webinar, they still can watch the recording. So moving on to the introductions, I've already introduced myself and I am very happy to welcome our 3 speakers of today. First, we welcome Dr. Wikan Ardiningrum, who is a fellow of geriatric psychiatry for the University of Indonesia in Yogyakarta. And she will be presenting on overcoming challenges in community research in times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, we welcome Dr. Dibanjan Banerjee, who is a consultant geriatric psychiatrist from the Apollo Clinicals Hospital in Kolkata, India. His presentation will be about conducting qualitative research in mental health. And last but not least, we welcome Janet Mitchell, who is a PhD candidate at the Dementia Center for Research Collaboration within the University of New South Wales, Australia. And she will be presenting about conducting qualitative research among people with dementia-associated behaviors in a residential care setting. So without further ado, we'll go on to the presentations.
Hello everyone, I'm Wikan Antiningrum, Fellow of Geriatric Psychiatry, Department of Psychiatry, University of Indonesia. I'm also psychiatrist of Gracia Mental Hospital in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Today, I would like to present about overcoming challenges in community research during the COVID-19 pandemic, optimization of local community resources, and IT uses to reach out to dementia caregiver respondents. The background of my study: the number of people living with dementia in Indonesia is predicted to increase up to 4 million people by 2050. Yogyakarta, one of the provinces in Indonesia, has the most elderly population. According to the data from Health Office in Yogyakarta Province in 2020, Sleman Regency has the highest percentage of people living with dementia compared to other regencies in Yogyakarta. Less than 1% of dementia caregivers in Yogyakarta knew the symptoms of dementia. Therefore, the comprehensive research about the need of the family caregivers that care elderly with dementia needs to be performed. The objective of my study: first, to understand the needs of family caregiver of elderly dementia in Sleman Regency. Second, to develop a supporting module aimed at family caregivers of elderly with dementia in Sleman Regency. In this presentation, I will discuss about the first objective. The methods of this study: study design, analytical, cross-sectional. Samples were from the population of family caregivers of the elderly with dementia that is resided in Sleman. The sample size is estimated based on the formula for multivariate analysis, which is a rule of thumb that the research subject needed is about 5 to 10 times the independent variable number. The independent variable is the problem area based on Carrier's Needs Assessment for Dementia or CNID. CNID instrument has been developed by Johannes van Kanta from Austria and has been adapted and validated for the Indonesian language. CNID has 18 problem areas, thus the needed samples are 90 until 180. The targeted samples are 135 after considering the research steps and available time. This number of samples is expected to be fulfilled since, according to the Health Office of Sleman, the number of people living with dementia in Sleman was about 165 in 2020. The inclusion criteria of the sample: he or she is a family of elderly dementia. They can be spouse, child, or other family member, age 18 or older and reside in Sleman. Caring the elderly with dementia for a minimum of 4 hours a day for 3 months prior to the study. Dementia is diagnosed based on the interview using clinical dementia rating scale. The caregiver willing to be involved in the research. Sampling process. In the preliminary plan, we collect sample by collaboration between Community Mental Health Unit in Gracia Mental Hospital with Primary Healthcare in Sleman. Primary Healthcare will invite caregivers in gathering. The research team will give education about mental health and afterward interview the caregiver to get data. We used to have this kind of gathering with primary healthcare. But in pandemic situation, we cannot do gathering, so we have to reach out to the caregiver person to person. However, according to team consideration, we do not do in-person contact because the vulnerability of the elderly in their house. So we have to use tele interview. The sampling process was conducted from September to December 2021. To conduct this study, we must have to get a permission letter from the Health Office of Sleman. We also printed a poster. This is the poster. The poster provided information such as research information, respondent criteria, rewards for the respondents, and contact person. The letter of permission and posters were distributed by post to health facilities in Sleman. The posters were also distributed in electronic form using Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp group to the local newspaper and caregiver group in Yogyakarta. The subjects that are willing to be involved in the study were requested to contact the contact person provided in the posters. The subjects that fulfill the requirement were requested to fill in the informed consent by electronic forms. The subjects were then interviewed by the researcher using tele-interview. The sampling method was non-probability sampling, consecutive sampling. The subjects were taken from the sorted list of the filling subject until the number of samples was fulfilled. From sampling process evaluation, almost no respondent directly contacted the researcher. There was one that contacted the researcher but finally was dropped due to the unwillingness of the main caregiver. Therefore, we have to contact the respondent personally according to the data provided by hospitals, caregivers group, and primary health care. This is the data source. We get data from primary healthcare. There is 25 primary healthcare in Sleman Regency from hospitals and group of caregivers. Total data was 225. From primary healthcare, we got 169 data, 91 from the community health workers and 78 from the person in charge of the program for the elderly in primary healthcare. The data from hospital were given by 2 hospitals. Some data were not selected because the caregivers did not respond, or the people living with dementia already passed away or had not resided in Sleman. Some data that didn't fulfill the selection criteria since the elderly were not dementia. Data collection process was conducted by 1 main researcher and 1 research assistant. The tasks for research assistant were preliminary screening based on 10 general symptoms of dementia according to the Indonesian Health Ministry criteria. To get informed consent, personal respondent data to assess caregiver burden with the shared burden interview. The media that she used were electronic form, tele-interview by chatting and telephone. Duration of interview was about 15 minutes per respondent. The test for main researcher were to diagnose dementia and to assess the severity level of dementia using the clinical dementia rating scale, to assess PPSD using the neuropsychiatric inventory, to assess caring problems and support needed using the CNAD instrument. The media I used was tele-interview by Zoom meeting, WhatsApp video call, or WhatsApp call, depend on preferences of the respondents. Duration the interview was 30 until 90 minutes. The challenges of this study: during 4 months, the number of respondents was only 65, less than target 135. Information dissemination by the local newspaper, social media, caregiver group were not fully effective. Some of the elderly data from the primary healthcare were elderly with chronic disease, for example, with hypertension and diabetes mellitus, not specific for elderly with dementia. The dementia data from the community health worker were from the report from the community, not yet diagnosed by doctors, about 46%. Not all of the elderly with dementia were registered in the primary healthcare. Almost no initiatives from caregiver to participate. The researcher has to personally persuade the caregiver one by one. The limited resources, only 1 main researcher and 1 research assistant. The tele-interview using inland media were vary depending on the availability of the telecommunication infrastructure, internet signal quality, the respondent skill in using online media, and verbal communication problem, especially if the caregivers were also elderly themselves, needed a lengthy and detailed explanation. Concluding remarks, from this study, I can learn that collaboration with primary healthcare is quite effective because more than 50% of respondents were obtained from primary healthcare through the person in charge of the program for the elderly and community health workers. Additional research members are needed to make collaboration with primary healthcare more effective, including assisting screening elderly with dementia in the community. Collaboration with community health worker is needed to assist respondent who has difficulty with tele-interview. For your information, one of the respondents in this research was assisted by a community health worker during the interview because she didn't have a mobile phone. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Warm greetings to everyone present here today. I am Dr. Dibanjan Banerjee, a geriatric psychiatrist from India, and I thank the IPA Early Career Network to give me this opportunity to be here today. At the outset, let me declare that I do not have any disclosures. And what I'll be doing here today is discuss some of the methodological challenges that early career professionals face, especially with regards to qualitative research in mental health. Uh, I really thank the ECN for organizing such a pertinent discussion during the ongoing COVID crisis. All of us early career professionals, we have faced numerous challenges in different forms of research. And it's always great to come together, learn from each other, and, grow together. And that's possibly the goal of today's discussion. Qualitative research has been quite close to me personally, and it's one of my field of interest. So a lot of what I'll be discussing today will be personal experience as well, and I'd love to receive your feedback and learn from your experiences in this regard. So as we start off, qualitative is new to many of us. It was new to me at a time, and I really didn't know what it means as well. But there is always a constant comparison between quantitative and qualitative forms of research. And this figure kind of shows you that numbers are possibly not everything, where there is a significant predominance of quantitative statistics in different forms of research. The how and what and experiences, rich lived experiences, are something which we get to know only through narrative analysis in qualitative research. So with this in mind, let's have a very brief discussion of what qualitative entails. Now, again, the discussion today is not too much on the theoretical aspects of qualitative, but in terms of methods, the challenges that we face mainly early in our career. But I think a brief context will be helpful, and just a couple of slides on that. So compared to quantitative, which mainly tests a pre-existing hypothesis or a theory, has closed-ended questions and relies typically on numerical statistics. Qualitative rather has, it's based on a deductive approach to generate new theories, is mainly dependent on open-ended questions, has a subjective component, the relatively smaller sample size, but we mostly analyze text, audio, video, and we explore the how, what, and specifically in what context an experience or a phenomena happens. So it helps us understand certain abstract phenomena, for example, the experience of minorities, migration, motherhood, pain, which literally can't be really quantified based on any rating scales. But however, both involve, understanding and, going into a process of deeper investigation. So in that way, the research is similar, but since most of us are exposed to quantitative research from early in our career, a big what, when, and how of qualitative develops when we first get introduced to it. Again, there are different approaches, starting from the very basic form of one-to-one interview. Even a single narrative analysis can form qualitative research. The different processes of observation, it can be ethnographic, residing in a community, analysis of audios and videos, focus group discussions. These are all different approaches to qualitative methods. I thought providing a brief on this will really help us as we move ahead with the discussion. Now, as a person venturing in the area of qualitative, these are the common caveats that one faces. I'm sure many of you may come out of with others or have things to add. I love your feedback on that, but this is what I personally faced, and also from the experiences of my colleagues in the field. So when do I do qualitative? You know, how do I formulate my research question? There are so many approaches to gathering the data and analyzing. So how do I decide on the approach? Which population do I study? How do I really keep, like, let's say I am discussing about pain, I'm exploring pain and I have faced it myself. So I'll be having a subjective opinion about that. So how do I really keep it aside, subjectivity bias? In qualitative, you cannot really stand apart from the data and tell that this is SPSS and this is my numerical statistics. I am only analyzing. You are very involved with the participants themselves. The researcher acts as an observer and an interpreter. So it's not really, you cannot subtract yourself from the research environment. There's a field of social constructivism on which, qualitative is based on, as opposite to the positivist approach of quantitative research, where there can be multiple truths. So it's not essential that one hypothesis have to be proved every time. And I think the subjective mood states while we deal with the participants becomes very important. And that's why, even though it's challenging, let me share this with you that in qualitative research, you not only grow professionally, but you also have a personal growth. Maybe I'll share a little bit more about this when we come to the end of the presentation. There is, in fact, when I was just reading up on this, there was, in fact, a paper a long back by Miller and Crabtree where they discussed that what are the common methodological issues. And I found that few are similar to what I faced myself. The role of the researcher as an interpreter, when you try to understand textual data, lived experiences of others, and they don't come in the form of numbers. The deductive nature of qualitative research, it's not that you have a hypothesis and either you prove or you refute a null hypothesis, but you sometimes generate something which is not really known. And finally, we do not really have any numbers or statistics here to establish the rigor. So the parameters of establishing validity and trustworthiness in qualitative is very different. Now, what questions do we commonly face when somebody just ventures and starts hearing about qualitative research? When I first came across this and my guide told me during my MD days, the first time, and that was the start of my love towards qualitative, where are the numbers? When I read a qualitative paper, I don't find a table with a p-value and a chi-square or statistics like that. So it commonly strikes me, how do I really understand a voluminous textual data? How do I interpret an audio video content? When somebody speaks to me, or let's say somebody talks to me today about their experiences of living life as with transgender identity. So it's not that they are filling a scale or a Likert scale of 0 to 5. How do they feel? What what have they experienced. And when they share that, it's not always about the text of it. Their non-verbal cues, their how they react during the interview, how they interact with each other in a focus group, everything matters. And how do I capture that? As I discussed already, how do I keep the subjectivity bias apart? And finally, and most importantly, when do I choose qualitative? When do I know that, okay, here is the research question for which a qualitative approach is necessary? A brief about my own journey, and I thought giving a practical example will be the best. So this was part of my thesis, and as I told you, my first love towards qualitative, how it started. So it was the analyzing the experiences of women with severe mental illness, about their motherhood, about their childbearing and rearing experiences. It's published as 3 different papers. This is one of them. So this is practically their experiences of sharing this experience, how they felt while sharing about motherhood with healthcare providers. Now, when we as mental health professionals think about qualitative, this is what I felt, that a lot of the perceptions, the psychopathology, phenomenology, what today we read in different textbooks, they come out of understanding and in-depth meaning. And I can't really keep participants as separate numbers, but I identify them as individuals with a context, with a life, with an identity. And observation becomes so important. I'm sure many of you remember the tales and the discussion of Samoa Island by Margaret Mead, which is a classic ethnographic work. So observation and behavior of people forms a very important yet challenging aspect of qualitative research. How do I decide the approach to analysis? There are different methods. Of course, due to time constraints, we can't discuss them here. But when I came across these, I was kind of, baffled. There are so many ways. Okay, there is no SPSS where I put numbers and I have parametric versus non-parametric statistics. Many of you may be thinking, why am I bringing in quantitative repeatedly? But this is what happens when early in your career, you venture towards the uncharted zones of qualitative, So whether it is CGT, narrative, thematic analysis, or interpretative phenomenological analysis, of course, each of them have their context and each of them have their relevance to the population, but how do you decide them? And finally, the biggest challenge came when you're interviewing the mothers of my study, which I mentioned. There was so much of emotional intensivity, they kept crying. Sometimes they didn't want their family members to be there. There was resistance from the family. Sometimes what I thought will be a 2 hours interview lasted for 3 days with different hours. We had to pause it because it was becoming taxing for both the participant and the researcher. There were problems with audio recording, confidentiality, and I think even though this was a big challenge to deal with interviews, it's not really giving skills to participants which you can fill. And mind it, friends and colleagues, when I tell this, it's not any of my intention to demean quantitative research, but I'm just telling you my own experience when I first got accustomed to typical quantitative research, and then I came to the qualitative field. What problems did I really face? Let's hear the story of someone who was one of my participants. Due to confidentiality reasons, the name is changed. So let's take her as Mrs. Malati. Now, she was a 29 years lady, graduate, who was detected and diagnosed as bipolar affective disorder with a rapid cycling variant, had 2 abortions, had recently given birth to a child, continuously heard from family that she was quote unquote a bad mother because of her illness, was not allowed to breastfeed the baby. There was custody loss inside the house. A lot of custody threat is seen in the Western literature in legal terms, but here nobody bothers. It's within the closed doors that the mother and the child is separated. Perceptions of being a bad mother and continuous balance between role as a mother versus role as a patient who suffers from a psychiatric ailment. Now, she was also lost to review because later, after the first session, she so wanted to come back. But when I called multiple times, the family members totally were reluctant to let her come back to us. And we really couldn't reach out to her after that. So I don't even know what happened to her. But the day this happened, it shook me so much as a human being, as a researcher, as a psychiatrist, that I thought that how can I really put together this, and how can I consider her just as a participant in my research, but not as an individual, because this itself, her own life story, her narrative can be so very overwhelming. So the challenge here, more than any issue, more than any other issue, friends, a significant methodological challenge is keeping the researcher's own emotional state, own life history kind of aside when you deal with sensitive issues of participants. And it may seem like a little bit far-fetched, but trust me, this is one of the significant issues that you face in qualitative research. When you deal with the qualitative data in terms of analysis, it's often voluminous. Nowadays, there are a lot of softwares, but because you have to immerse yourself in the data, read, and read it so many times that today I kind of memorized a lot of narratives of the participant mothers. You can't think that data will come to you in a tabulated form and numbers will be generated. Each of them will stay imprinted in your memory as individuals. The problems of translation and whether the socio-cultural context of what they have told you is reflected when you translate them to English. Finally, memo writing, the analysis of qualitative starts right from the first day that you have started collecting data. So you can't really wait and then feed it for a subsequent analysis. And finally, the challenge is to stay neutral. In fact, they say that, in the classic textbook of Lincoln and Guba, it is said that you cannot stay neutral. In fact, if you stay neutral, you are not doing justice to the qualitative data. Coming to the trustworthiness component, the concept of reliability and validity is very different in qualitative. The nuances of coding, the initial coding, the subsequent coding, repeatedly going through the codes, going back to the participants, what we call as respondent validation, presenting the results and getting their feedback. Many times, it's a very cumbersome process. You may not be able to even find all of them. Triangulation, getting multiple perspectives, two different persons independently analyzing the data, then sitting, discussing. Bracketing is again a way to kind of try to prevent the subjective bias, trying to have a preconceived framework and not, try not to have a preconceived framework and not to fit in, rather try to have genesis of new theory. And in that research that I mentioned in the paper of my thesis, we used grounded theory because the very concept is not to have preconceived notion or hypothesis, but the excerpts, what the participants said, based on that, a theory is formed about the experiences of motherhood, which is grounded in their voices. So that's why it's called grounded theory. And again, the most important challenge which emerges later is how you write down and how you present qualitative data. So when I think today, with roughly almost 5-6 years down the line, when first qualitative research started for me, presenting in various conferences, talking to my colleagues, many times it's very difficult to explain it to people. You will handle different forms of criticisms, constructive, not so constructive. I personally felt that I lacked adequate knowledge, and thanks to the International Society of Qualitative Research, that I attended a wonderful workshop, which kind of, again, made me love qualitative more, identify the research problem, the context, the population group, presenting qualitative research because it can often be very voluminous, and finally, be ready to travel very uncomfortable paths, because as you navigate the participants' lives, you can never really forget them and it becomes a part of your identity. But at the same time, you have to prevent them from interfering with the study results. So coming back to the challenges that I mentioned earlier, it will be lovely to have your perceptions and opinion on the same, and I hereby open it for discussion. Over to the moderator. I'm sure that we all can learn from all of your experiences and your take in the field. I'd like to end by this quote from one of my participants. You know, they have asked so much related to my illness, but it looks like even though I'm a woman, I could never be looked upon as a mother to my doctors. And this was so very moving. You have told me to answer all questions in detail, but trust me, I have been silent for so long that the words are lost. Don't know if this will be of any help to your research. While she felt that, I felt it was immensely helpful to me as a qualitative researcher. So let me end with a positive note. There may be many methodological challenges in this field, but trust me, it's worth it. With that note, thanks once again to the IPA Early Career Network team. Thanks for having me as a part of it. Thank you for your patient listening.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for making the time to be with us today. I'm very grateful for the IPA team who have been willing to host this seminar in the early hours of the morning for them. This has enabled many of us around the world to participate at a more agreeable time. This opening slide shows the order in which I will present the methodological challenges that emerged during my doctoral research. I will first outline the benefits of recognizing these challenges at the outset of a research project, and then discuss each challenge a little more in the following slides with reference to my study as applicable. First, appreciating the difference between mixed methods and multi-methods with data triangulation from the beginning will save time and likely rework. This is because the right direction for a selected research approach will have been established to enable appropriate data collection, data analysis, and write-up of the research findings. Being aware of the factors associated with scientific rigor in qualitative research helps to ensure that we will be more mindful of these factors as we progress through our respective studies. Hence, establishing that scientific rigor has been achieved in a study will be more straightforward during write-up. Inter-rater reliability is important because of its association with the credibility and validity of our research outcomes. A pilot study can be instrumental in showing where improvements need to be made to propose survey questions, templates, and or forms that have not been prescribed in a method or particular instrument. This is because responses from pilot participants can confirm whether our proposed questions, survey templates, and or forms have enabled us to capture the information we expected. The most important points from this slide are first, that the approach we take will be guided by the philosophical assumptions of our research, since these assumptions inform the direction of our data collection and data analysis. For instance, in my research, the philosophical base was the version of person-centered care espoused by Tom Kitwood, sometimes also captured in expressions such as relationship-centered care and relational person-centered care. Second, the principal factor in mixed methods is that one set of data is obtained specifically for the purpose of informing the questions and or measures in one or more other sets of data. This means that the findings from phase 1 of a study will be critical for the study's phase 2, findings from phase 2 critical for phase 3, and so on as applicable. With triangulation, each data set obtained by a particular method is first analysed independently. Findings from each analysis are then compared and or contrasted. In this way, triangulation helps to validate or cross-reference results so that the robustness and accuracy of the data collected can be monitored. In other words, our convergence approach. Second, triangulation helps to compare different research findings that pertain to the same problem or topic addressed in a study. This is possible because triangulation accepts that there are multiple ways of knowing a problem or topic, and these ways are incorporated into the study design. In other words, a complementarity approach. Third, triangulation accepts that data sets do not always align equally, and any inconsistencies are, or may be, important, hence a divergence approach. In my study, the results of 5 methods were analysed to provide a fuller picture of my topic, namely the meaningful relationships for people experiencing dementia-associated behaviours in residential aged care. Triangulation allowed corroboration of results to answer the study's research question. Hence, my study adopted a complementarity approach. In my study, I demonstrated confirmability through regular reviews and reflections with my supervisors about the ways I was coding transcripts during data analysis. Credibility was achieved through prolonged engagement in aged care homes and with the study participants. Dependability was achieved by debriefings with peers and our shared understanding of the experiences of the study participants in their respective care homes. And transferability by the clear descriptions I provided of both the settings of my study's care homes and of the observed situations of the study participants. Inter-rater reliability matters for at least 2 reasons. First, it can be an important criterion in selecting a study instrument, along with, for instance, other criteria such as content, convergent, and face validity. Second, our gaining inter-rater reliability for instruments chosen in our studies may contribute to the acceptance of our study's results. In my study, I used the neuropsychiatric inventory nursing home version, with which some of you may be familiar. I achieved inter-rater reliability after co-rating 4 assessments with a proficient assessor. The inter-rater reliability was calculated in SPSS by the intra-class coefficient and the 95% confidence interval. These 2 calculations correspond to inter-rater reliability. I achieved an intra-class correlation of 0.99 and a 95% confidence interval of 0.98 to 1. I also used the person-centered environment and care assessment tool. Its inter-rater reliability had been confirmed with Pearson's correlations of 0.94 to 0.96 and intra-class correlation coefficients from 0.92 to 0.95. The tool's content, convergent, and face validity had also been established. I co-rated a number of assessments with the author of the tool. I achieved inter-rater reliability, and once I achieved inter-rater reliability, once I had attained over 85% inter-rater reliability on each of the 16 different constructs within the tool. Factoring a pilot into our research from the outset can prove beneficial if we have not previously used an instrument and/or method. In my study, I hadn't initially planned a pilot, hence my study's timeline had to be extended. For me, the pilot was useful in determining the questions I subsequently asked study participants experiencing dementia-associated behaviours in aged care homes. It also helped to finalise the content and design of the forms I used to capture social network data and to rate and capture notes and important contextual elements during the observation of the interactions of the study's participants. My experience has shown that attending to methodological challenges upfront or as soon as possible in a study facilitates data collection and analysis and the interpretation and presentation of a study's findings. I wish you every success with your current and future research endeavours, especially as you select the instruments associated with the methods you plan to use in your research.
So thanks a lot to all the presenters, and our genuine apologies for the technical difficulties. It's unfortunate that we didn't have the quality of the screens that we would have liked. So hopefully when the recording will be posted on the website, I hope the quality will be better. But anyway, thanks a lot to the three presenters with their very interesting and motivating talks about challenges in community-based research, on qualitative research, and mainly on mixing both qualitative and quantitative methods. For the Q&A session, I'd like to welcome you all to turn on your cameras to have you all on screen. And if you have any questions for the presenters or for the presenters, if you have any questions for the audience, please raise your hand or just unmute and shoot out your questions. Yeah, Raymond?
Yeah, Sasha, to make a start, thank you for the presenters for the very interesting talks. I have just one suggestion, maybe also a question. We have experience in our research group with qualitative research, and looking at the journals, then most of the journal at this time ask to add a checklist from the COREC guidelines, which stands for the Consolidated Criteria of Reporting Qualitative Research. And I was planning, I was set a link in the chat, and maybe ask Janet and Debanja, are you familiar with this checklist, and did you already use the checklist?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Raymond. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So in fact, the way I came across COREC was that, as you rightly said, when we started going out and trying to publish our first papers, one of the journals actually returned the paper telling that, it needs to be according to the COREC, and I think it's by Tong et al. So that's the first time that we came across. I think there are even journals which mention that you need to have the filled correct checklist and attach it as a supplementary material in order to establish, kind of for the rider. So since then, we have been using, and we make it a point that we usually mention it in the methodology section as well. In fact, if there are any of the items in correct, we also mention that. So I think what I personally feel is correct. It's also an useful way to evaluate your paper once it's ready for submission.
Yes.
So many times what we have seen is when we go through the checklist, for example, there are items like what has your relationship been with the participants prior to the research, or what has in what setting did you conduct the interviews? So things like that matter a lot in many areas, and I think it's also divided into some 4 or 5 groups, and under each group there are separate questions. So I think it provides a good framework for us to evaluate our work as well before we submit or send the revised paper to the journal. Thank you.
Okay.
Uh,
And Janet, ask you.
and actually, I must admit, I haven't seen the checklist, Dr. Raymond. So yeah, so that's something I need to follow up.
Yes, it's in the chat. So I think it's very helpful. I put a link in the chat.
Yes, if that could be shared.
Yes, it's shared in the chat.
Right.
Is it? Is it
Okay.
yet? I can't see it.
Yes, yeah, I can't see it either.
Oh, sorry,
Actually.
I mailed it in a direct message to the IPA. Sorry, that's I have to change it to everyone. Well, here it comes. Sorry for that. Okay, this is
Yeah,
the
there it
correct
is.
one. Yes. Okay, here you are.
Yeah,
So
I have shared it as well. Yeah, right.
maybe another question could be maybe an advice for the other listeners, participants. Did you use software for the coding process?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Raymond. We did. So we back at NIMHANS, the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, where we started the qualitative project, we had an institute license for Atlas TI.
Yeah.
And right now, I mean, now that I work separately back at my own place, I feel more comfortable using the NVivo. So we use the NVivo 10 version, especially for analyzing video and audio content interviews, or especially when you are analyzing documentaries. I think I personally feel that NVivo is more helpful, for organizing the data. You just need to mention one thing here. Again, this is my personal take. Unlike quantitative softwares, actually just provide us with a framework to organize qualitative data. Ultimately, the analysis has to be manual, and no matter how much the software helps, it's it kind of gives you a very well arranged furnished room, but you have to arrange the stuff yourself.
Yeah. Can you put the names of the software into the chat so that everybody can read and afterwards can search for it? And Janet?
Yes, and I used Leximancer.
Okay, so we have already 3 different software packages which can be used. Okay, thank you.
And I agree with Debanjan that even though like Leximancer could do a lot, from a quantitative point of view, ultimately I then still had to bring out core themes from what like the software had done. So there was still I suppose a level of interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I might just add one thing, I agree with Janet in this, and I suddenly recall that I think both Lexicon as well as NVivo is quite helpful for content analysis. In fact, I remembered recently reading which had content analysis of a significant amount of Twitter data regarding panic buying in COVID. And it was I think it was in the first wave possibly. So because in content analysis it's almost like both quantitative and qualitative, it really helps.
Yeah. I must admit I actually did a content analysis using Leximancer, and then I did a thematic analysis without software.
Yes.
Of interview responses to research questions. And actually for me it was both based on quality of care and also around person-centered care in an aged care home.
Thanks a lot for your insights. I do have one additional question, mainly based on Wikan's presentation. You were talking about recruitment and that you used newspapers and social media and so on to recruit participants, but that it still didn't seem sufficient. So this is something that I recognize, and probably many of you recognize in old age care or mental health, that it's a challenge to recruit. So Do any of the other participants, do you have any tips or experiences that you want to share that might help to recruit?
Perhaps I might jump in there and just say, I think that recruitment is probably one of the most, if not one of the most timing components of any research project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I recruited aged care homes, and there was high turnover of management, so one might agree and then the other manager wouldn't agree. And then of course there were all the participants. So it's you need to allow time, because I don't think it's ever straightforward.
Thanks, Janet. Any other experiences, or maybe from the more senior researchers among us, you have any success factors?
Well, Sasha, regarding recruitment, you are aware, but you're working at one of the academic networks of nursing homes in the Netherlands, and that is very helpful because we have an infrastructure of academic networks of care homes and long-term care facilities, Jenny, and these are all dedicated to participate in research. That doesn't mean that's very easy, but it's very helpful. So we can always recruit within our own networks in search for collaboration and participation in studies. And so we already published several papers about these academic networks. So this can be maybe it's helpful to learn from us.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, just one thing. As Dr. Raymond was mentioning, and I was hearing Dr. Whiten's agree, because our country also has a similar setup. So